Dan Dickau here, Gonzaga Nation SI, the WCC Weekly, and what a week it was in the WCC. I continue to have that theme each time I kind of recap the previous week and then look ahead to the week that is about to be. When you look at this past week for Gonzaga in particular, talk about ups and downs. From the previous weeks where you had three straight road games where you won in the clutch to a blowout home win, you're really tested this past week. You're tested because of the way that LMU played. You're tested the way that they responded when you made a run late, and then they responded by having the game-winning bucket and play by Cam Shelton. So we all know that was a loss for Gonzaga. It broke a 76-game home winning streak. LMU hadn't won in Spokane since 1991. But you got to give a tip of the cap to Coach Stan Johnson. A really good game plan. And then Kelly Leapepe in particular, Cam Shelton really executed it. Cam Shelton was best player on the floor down the stretch of the game. Ball was in his hands. He made the right decisions. He controlled the tempo, he controlled the pace, and then he made the big time shot with about 15 seconds left. So, if you look at big picture WCC, he wins my Player of the Week award last week. Obviously, he did win that as voted on by other media members as well. But 28 against Gonzaga, 26 in their second game, where unfortunately for LMU, they lost to Santa Clara. They beat USD. Player of the Week, Cam Shelton. Finishing up, just quickly touching on Gonzaga. Bounced back with a win, even though it was a struggle defensively. I mean, you give up 90 points to Pacific. You got to look at a couple different things. What were your defensive assignments, rotations, or were you just in a fast-paced game? And I think it's a little bit of both. A lot of people are concerned about 90 points, but when you play like Gonzaga at the pace, there's going to be a ton of possessions. So you got to look at the points per possession and the efficiency on the defensive end of the floor. It's not where they want it to be, but you can't get too bent out of shape that they gave up 90 points because of that pace. Continuing through the league, St. Mary's sitting at 7-0 in first place. They're finally back in the top 25, which is sitting at 22 in both the coaches and the AP poll, while Gonzaga slid 8 spots to 14, which I think is about right at this moment in time. I think St. Mary's should be higher, quite frankly. I think they should be around that same 14 to 18 mark that Gonzaga is. They don't have the national reputation and credibility from years past that people are used to with Gonzaga. And St. Mary's is darn good this year. They're experienced in many positions. They have enough youth where there's still going to be a lot of growth, in particular in their leading scorer, Aiden Mahaney, which makes it a little scary. They've got rebounding, they've got size, and defensively, you look at their efficiency numbers there on that end of the floor. They're top 6 or 7, I believe, as last time I checked a couple of days ago. But they had a really good week. They beat Pepperdine 73-44 and Santa Clara 77-58. And that was kind of a statement game because a lot of people were curious if Santa Clara could break into for sure that top 3, maybe even challenge St. Mary's. And it didn't look that way. And when you look at St. Mary's defense, they took out the best player on each of those two teams. Maxwell Lewis for Pepperdine was held to 5 points. Brandon Pajimski was held to 7 points. So they put together a terrific game plan, and then they executed and make life difficult for the opponent. So great job for St. Mary's. You talk about on the side of in the angle of Santa Clara, they're sitting at 4-3. They had a big win against BYU. Keyshawn Justice 23 points, Carlos Stewart 21, and Pajimski had 17 in that game. So that was big to kind of begin to separate themselves from that middle of the pack to be that next tier or at the top of the middle of the pack. And then the loss to St. Mary's, which we just spoke of. LMU's right behind them. They've got they beat USD and they lost to Gonzaga. They've got a big one coming up this in about 2 weeks. They play Santa Clara on the February 11th. So they only play one time this year. So I think that's a really key game, a really important game to look at. BYU's sliding a little bit because they brought both games, which we'll talk about in a second. But LMU and Santa Clara look to be really kind of fighting for that number 3 and number 4 slot in the WCC, which again is important because of seeding in the conference tournament. BYU, as mentioned, dropped both games in the Bay, so they're sitting at 4-4 in conference play. They were at Santa Clara, at USF. That Santa Clara game we talked about, where the big three each had good games for Santa Clara. Rudy Williams, 24 off the bench for BYU. Traore, Gideon George, playing okay, but they're not being, the dominant figures that Mark Pope needs them to be. And then at USF, BYU dropped a game 82-74. Rudy Williams again had a good game, 28 points. He was very efficient, 10 of 13 from the field. But they gave up 12 threes, and the backcourt of USF had a great game. Khalil Shabazz had 21, Tyrell Roberts, a career high 30 points. So that for me, that San Francisco team, they're hot and cold because of how their guards go, because they can shoot you in it and they can shoot you out of it in a hurry. But that's a scary team because they have that firepower. The Pilots of Portland next at 3-4. Looks like they may have righted the ship a little bit after that beatdown Gonzaga gave them by 40 on the road. They won both games. They beat USD 88-83. Moses Wood looks like he's healthy again, which is great. 26 points, 7 rebounds, 8 of 9 from the field. They as a team against the Toreros shot 61% from the field. So you're seeing, I think, a team that finally has some practice time together to build that chemistry and get used to what needs to be done in Shante Legan's system. And they followed that up with a game against Pepperdine where they won 91-76 at home. Moses Wood, another good game, with 17. The Pilots made 14 threes in that game, and 5 guys were in double figures. So very typical of a Shante Legan's team going back to the time he was at Eastern Washington. Lots of options, space the floor, freedom for guys to shoot it, make plays. Pacific is tied there with the Pilots sitting at 3-4. The Tigers, they were that upstart early in conference. They started off at 3-1. They've now lost 3 games in a row. This past week, they were at USF, which we all know is a tough place to play. They lost 78-57. They gave up 13 made threes to USF, and they only shot 31% from the field for the game. 31%. You're not going to be in ball games. You're not going to have a chance to win games when you shoot that from the field. They turned around and played the Zags at home in Stockton. And as I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, they lost 99-90 in an up and down game. But Gonzaga was able. Drew Timme had the career high 38. Gonzaga shot 59% from the field. But if you're following this in regards to looking at what Pacific did, you got to think there's a little bit of promise there. 5 guys were in double figures. You were negative 13 on the glass, and you still only lost by 9. Had a couple really good performances. Ivy Curry, Avdalovich, Boone, all I thought played really well. But, at the end of the day, you're talking about the firepower of Gonzaga on the offensive end. It was just too much Drew Timme with that career high 38 that I mentioned. Bottom 2 in the league. It's not a big surprise based off of what we saw in the non-conference, and it's continued. USD with Steve Lavin, they've got a rebuild going. They got a lot of talent. They just haven't put it together yet. I think that's going to be a unique program to keep an eye on in the next year or two. We know Steve Lavin has recruited at the highest levels at UCLA as well as at St. John's. So it'll be interesting to see once he kind of really gets his vision going, what they're going to do down there. But they dropped a game to LMU 98-84, where they gave up 14 made threes. They were down 10 on the glass. Marcellus Earlington continued to play well. He had 24. Jace Townsend had 21, but it was not enough. It kind of kickstarted LMU with that positive energy, making 14 threes. So then they go up to Spokane and get that big win themselves. Then they lost at UP 88-83, 11 made threes in that game. But it wasn't enough because the Pilots shot 61% from the field. Marcellus Earlington, 32 in that game. Pepperdine, 0-7 now on the season, 0-7. They've got talent. You would think that talent would start to generate some experience and some winning mentality, and it just hasn't been the case yet. Sometimes teams have to go through some struggles, and then all of a sudden it clicks overnight. So if you're a Pepperdine fan, you got to hope that it's going to turn over and click any day now. But it's been a little bit of a struggle there. But Pepperdine lost to St. Mary's 73-44, and with that, they only shot 30% from the field. I talked about on the St. Mary's side, they forced Pepperdine's best player, Maxwell Lewis, into a struggle where he only had 5 points. They do such a good job of taking that away. Matter of fact, Pepperdine only had one player in double figures that night, and that was Houston Millette, 15 points, 5-11 from the field. Everybody else was a combined 11 of 42 from the field. So that's hovering right around 27% or so, not going to cut it. And they were just dominated on the glass. They were -18 on the glass that day. They did put up a little bit better effort at Portland. Maxwell Lewis bounced back with 18 points, but they gave up 14 threes. So not a good week overall for Pepperdine, but that kind of seems to be the recurring theme. When you look at this week, Gonzaga only has one game. They've got that Thursday bye. I think it comes at the right time because guys are looking tired. You're almost to those dog days of February. You've got BYU one more time. You've got Santa Clara one more time. You've got St. Mary's twice. You can kind of get a 5-6 days stretch after that last game at Pacific. You can get some guys healthy that need it, some rest for guys that need it. You can get some extra skill work for the guys that aren't playing big minutes, maybe build their confidence with reps and skill work drills, as well as practice, getting ready to go for their game on Saturday at University of Portland. So WCC continues to trend in the right direction. 5 teams in the top 100 of net, which is important because it begins to situate and break down more quad 1 and quad 2 opportunities. And the fact that I think Pacific or Pepperdine, those are the only 2 teams in the 200s. They're both hovering around the 210 to 220 mark. If they could find a way to knock off one of the middle of the pack teams with a win, maybe their quad or their net ranking climbs into the hundreds. And if that were the case, now you're really starting to take away those quad 4 loss opportunities, which is huge for the entire league. So that being said, great league this year, lots of excitement, should be another good week. Check us out on all social media platforms, Gonzaga Nation SI. Like, subscribe, review. We'll take care. We'll see you soon.